our dear friend Scott Ritter is here with us. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
Please subscribe and hit the like button, helping us reaching more people. And Scott, let me start with what's happening in the United States with the case of bombing a boat, and which was the first bombing and the second to kill the two survivors of that, the first bombing. And Pete Hegseth was somehow changing his rhetoric. First he said he didn't know it. Then he said that he didn't know the second bombing. And here is what, Rand Paul said about the position of Pete Hegseth together with Donald Trump, considering that bombing. Your take on what's going on with the Trump administration and the way that they're responding to the media, to the mainstream media, to those people within the Republican Party who are concerned about these sort of actions on the part of the U.S. Government.
Well, look, this isn't good for Donald Trump. This isn't good for Pete Hegseth. This isn't good for Admiral Frank Bradley. All three could be involved in war crimes. And I just want to remind people that this isn't a trivial matter. I think it's the 1996 War Crimes Act says that if you're found guilty of a war crime, a grave violation of the Geneva Conventions, the penalty is life imprisonment or death. So this isn't a joke. Pete Hegseth could be put before a firing squad and shot. I don't think he will be, but he could be. Admiral Radcliffe could spend the rest of his life in jail. Should, in fact, if he did this. This administration has, created a problem for itself because there's the fog of war, and I have to be honest. If you're dealing with, decisions made under stress, under duress, mistakes are made. It's not a war crime. It sometimes, it could fall in, but intent, it clearly comes down to intent. This is a president who has said that he wants to kill all the narco terrorists. He has no problem killing them. I want them dead. I want them killed. Kill them, kill them, kill them. This is a Secretary of War. Right off the bat, we got a problem here. Because he had stopped being a Secretary of Defense and it became a Secretary of War. And this Secretary of War appeared before 800 flag officers in Quantico and talked about how he doesn't do silly rules of engagement anymore. We are a lethal fighting force. Gloves off. We kill, kill, kill. And it appears that there has been guidance given to kill everybody on board these ships. Kill them. To make a point. This is a political point that this act of the allegations of, narco trafficking won't be tolerated. Kill them all. That's the order that's been given. Kill them all. That's a war crime in and of itself. You just go to 2015 edition of I think it might even been updated 2017 edition of or maybe 2025, who knows, of the Law Warfare Manual published by the Department of Defense. And it clearly says that you cannot give an order of no quarter. That's an unlawful order. Can't be obeyed, must be disobeyed. So if at any time the president or Hegseth said kill them all, the only response is no, sir, and I'm rejecting this order in writing because this order is a flagrant violation of the law of war. And I would be subjected to criminal proceedings under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So I'm not just saying no, but I'm doing it in writing formally, telling you that this is an unlawful order. And there's really nothing that can be done to that person because what the president's going to say, oh, yeah, I gave you an unlawful order and I'm going to punish you for failing to obey my unlawful order. And Hegseth, so right off the bat, we have a problem because Hegseth and Trump have corrupted the mindset of military professionals. Let me just make it clear as day, Nima. I was trained to kill, all right? And I can kill a hell of a lot better than half the people in the military today. All right. I was trained to close with and destroy the enemy through firepower maneuver. And I was a heartless, ruthless son of a bitch. If you went to war against me and my fellow Marines, we would have slaughtered every single one of you with joy, because that's what we were trained to do. But we were also trained that war, as horrible as it is, there has to be restraints. As a second lieutenant, I was trained on the law of war. We don't murder people. We kill them. You got a gun, you're dead. You pose a threat, you're dead. I will not lose any sleep killing any threat to America, any lawful threat. I will obey every lawful order given to me to wade into the enemy and butcher them. The idea that somehow the military has lost its ability to kill. Hegseth himself indicts himself. In the same speech he gave to 800 flag officers, he said the standard he wants is the 03, that's a captain rank, 1991. Guess who was an 03 captain in 1991? Me. I'm the standard. I'm the most lethal trained American that's ever been made. Me and my fellow Marines, soldiers. At that time in 1991, there was no finer fighting force in the world. There has never been a finer. We were highly trained. I mean, training that you couldn't even imagine today. We spent more time in 29 Palms in my field artillery unit. We fired, one battalion fired more live rounds of artillery in realistic training conditions than the entire Marine Corps fires this time. One battalion of artillery in 1985, 86, 87, 88, we fired more artillery ammunition in one training year than the entire Marine Corps fires today. That tells you something. And again, we weren't just sitting there pumping rounds downrange. We were out in the field, moving, shooting, communicating under realistic conditions, preparing to fight a Soviet threat who outnumbered us, outgunned us. We had to move all the time. We had to be clever in our tactics. We trained. And when we went up against the Iraqis in Desert Storm, we kicked their ass. And people go, well, what? Fourth largest army in the world, just got off of fighting a major war with Iran and winning, compelling the Iranians to, accept a peace deal that Khamenei, the supreme leader, said was like drinking a cup of poison. The Republican Guard was considered to be one of the finest fighting forces the world has ever seen. Modern Russian equipment, very effective, well-trained, well-led, well-motivated. These are kick-ass kind of guys, and we slaughtered them. They didn't stand a chance. Nobody would have stood a chance against us back then. And so this notion that somehow our military didn't know how to kill, that Pete Hegseth had to come in and teach them how to kill by saying, kill, kill, kill. What stupidity. Our military knows how to kill. They don't need to be treated like children and said, now the gloves are off. Man, when the time comes to fight, we will kill, but we don't murder. That's the difference. See, as a second lieutenant, I was shown videos in my law of warfare class, specifically about U.S. submariners after sinking Japanese merchant shipping. There's videos of this. They came in and the Japanese are in the water and they just casually sat there and shot them. Machine gunned them down, shot them, killed them all, laughing about it. Japanese are begging to be rescued, just killing them all. Japanese did it to us. We did it to the Germans. The Germans did it to us. At the end of the Second World War, some German submariners were actually arrested, tried, and executed for murder. This was so prevalent in Second World War. And this is why it's important to understand, because everybody's bringing up videos of, AC-130s hitting people in Afghanistan and saying, see, this is the double tap. None of it matters. We're talking about in the water, maritime. In 1949, the Geneva Conventions were written specifically addressing this issue, that you cannot, once a ship is hit and the people are in the water, they are hors de combat. That's the French pronunciation of what we Marines would like to say, hors de combat. You're out of the fight, man. You can't fight anymore. You're in the water. You are now somebody that can't be attacked. You must be rescued. You are a protected person. It doesn't matter. Read the freaking law. I have. It doesn't matter if you're a sailor for a Navy, a merchant marine, or a narco-terrorist. It doesn't matter if this is national war, or international war. It doesn't matter. You're in the water. You're out of the fight. You can't be killed. End of story. Reaffirmed in 1977, the additional protocols of the Geneva Convention, and adopted by the United States since that time as part of the Law of Warfare Manual. It is clear, 100% clear. Bam, you hit a ship, people are in the water, can't touch them. There's no exceptions to this. There's no exceptions to it. They can't be attacked. And this appears to be what happened. Now, we don't know the exact timelines. I mean, again, Hegseth doesn't do himself any favors because he's saying that he was there for the first strike, but then he left and hours later, a decision was made. That means it's not spur of the moment. This isn't, SEAL Team 6 up there going, oh my God, guys in the water. Look, you might be going for a gun. Take them out. Boom, boom, boom. That means somebody considered the video and said, we're going to kill these people. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a war crime, a murder most foul, to quote Hamlet. This is a crime punishable by death. This is where we're at today in America. I mean, and it's funny because, Hegseth and Trump are going after what they call the seditious six, those 6 Democratic lawmakers who dared suggest that military officers not obey unlawful orders. Then we're attacked for that. How dare you? My God, Bradley may be very well wishing that he had listened to. I think it was Hegseth in 2016, maybe 2019. I think he said the same thing. It was up there back when Barry Obama was the president, and Hegseth hated Barry Obama, and they were out there saying, "You're droning people, buddy." And he gave a lecture. He said, "We can't obey those unlawful orders given by the president of the United States." Well, Pete, you should have listened to your own self, because if there is justice in the world, you should be arrested, tried, and probably we don't do the death penalty at the federal level anymore, but put in jail for life. Now, he'll probably get a presidential pardon because Trump, of course, will probably do that, and Bradley will. They won't see a day in jail. They'll get pardoned, but they're criminals nonetheless. And sadly, so too, the criminal mindset that exists in our military. This has to be purged. It has to be purged. This is a problem.
The point is, one of the points that Rand Paul said in his comment, he said that they're trying to, saying that we were not responsible for that. It seems that they're moving that responsibility toward the admiral. Do you think that is happening? That would be hugely.
I see that happening, but just remember, there's 2 separate crimes potentially at play here. One is the kill them all crime. I think a solid case could be made that the intent of the president and the Secretary of War was to kill them all, and that orders, verbal or written, have been given to that effect. So that's an unlawful order right off the bat. So they're tainted with that. Did Hegseth personally order the second strike? Didn't need to if his order was kill them all. I mean, we don't know. Did he, boom, blow him up, kill them all, he said, and walked out of the room. Or before they started, make sure we kill them all. Sir, there's 11 men on that ship. Kill them all. Because according to the Washington Post, that was Bradley's understanding, that he was to kill them all. New York Times indicates there might be some, again, he said, she said, we won't know until there's a trial. And there should be a trial. There must be a trial. But, they're clearly trying to push this down on Bradley's shoulders. And with all due, let's just, we got to dig deeper in this Bradley character. All right. As he may be a vice admiral, or I think he's an admiral today. Big guy. I think now he was at the time the commander of Joint Special Operations Command, the Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 guys. Now I think he's the commander of, Special Operations Command, the whole big thing. But there was a time when he was a member of SEAL Team 6. And herein lies the rub. SEAL Team 6 is a criminal organization. Every single one of them. They're murderers. They have an ethos that's just unforgivable. Red Team canoes people is part of their thing. Robert O'Neill, you remember him? Oh, Rob O'Neill. I killed Osama bin Laden. He didn't. Some other SEAL killed him. O'Neill came in afterwards and canoed him. Canoeing is shooting them in the head to split the skull open as a sign of, look, we were here. You could do it with a weapon. You could do it with an axe. The red men, they did that. And every single one of there's 4, saber squadrons or whatever the hell you want to call them, blue, gold, silver, and red. All of them are criminals. You go and take a look at the fighting at they call it Roberts Ridge, named after a Navy SEAL that fell out of an airplane and got killed. The SEAL team that was there, the commander of that SEAL team, later on went on a strike and attacked a wedding party. And they were so revenge oriented that as they came through, there were survivors in the ditch, and he murdered them, shot them, murdered them. This is what the SEALs do. They murdered people in Afghanistan and then, framed weapons. They murder everybody. They aren't good people. It's a corrupt ethos. And Radcliffe was at the center of this. So Radcliffe isn't some sort of innocent that has risen to a rank and suddenly is put in a very difficult situation. He is a murdering son of a bitch who has murdered people his entire career. Sue me, Radcliffe. Let's see what the discovery says. All right, let's go through each and every one of the operations you were involved in as an officer. Let's look at the cover-ups that you had as you covered for your chiefs and others who were committing crimes, and you let those crimes slide. There's a book, Alpha, that goes through the SEAL mentality. Read it. You guys will understand exactly what I'm going at. The Navy SEALs as an institution should be disbanded because it produces officers like Radcliffe who then get into higher position and will accept unquestionably an unlawful order to kill them all. Now, why would he accept this unquestionably? Because he's been conditioned to be a murderer. I mean, this is where we're at. American military ethos is sick, and you see it on social media. All these former military people out there just bragging about committing a war crime. Bragging. Buzz Patterson, some asshole who carried Bill Clinton's briefcase, nuclear briefcase, thinks that makes him a hero. Flew C-141s. He's out there talking like he was top dog, and they're hooking and jabbing in the trenches. He's a fat piece of crap who's there today saying things online, implying that it's okay to commit a war crime. It's okay to murder people. And he's echoed by people like Robert O'Neill. Now, we know O'Neill's corrupt because he committed a war crime and, the canoeing of Osama bin Laden. But it goes on and on and on. And what this tells you is that the people on social media, whom normally I wouldn't pay attention to, but it's such an overwhelming response, it says there's a problem in our military where they are conditioned after 20 years of the global war on terror to commit war crimes. And it seems to be that this is acceptable ethos today. It was never acceptable. I'm getting here to tell you right now, those little Peckerwoods that fought the global war on terror, you guys got a little firefight here, a little firefight there. The war we trained for back in the 80s was World War, large-scale ground combat. We were prepared for death on a scale that you couldn't even begin to comprehend. And yet we would never tolerate murder like this. Never tolerate it. It was against everything we stood for, against the oath we took. Why these people today have their brains so corrupted, it's beyond me. There's a fundamental problem in how we prepare and train our military today. Everything's become political. Used to be that we were apolitical. Look, when I joined the military in 1979, Jimmy Carter was the president of the United States. I was no Jimmy Carter fan, but he was my president. He was my commander-in-chief. You obey the orders given. Ronald Reagan became the president. I liked Ronald Reagan. Sort of happy. George H.W. Bush went to war under him. But then Bill Clinton came in. Didn't like Bill Clinton at all. Didn't matter. I had a job to do. Profession. Didn't let the politics get in the way of the job. But today now, thanks to George W. Bush, well, I think Bill Clinton started it, purging people who he deemed were, not politically loyal. What do you mean politically loyal? Military's not supposed to be politically loyal. They're loyal to only one thing, the Constitution. And therein lies the rub. Because people stopped being loyal to the Constitution and started becoming loyal to a politician, to a president, to a political party. And that's where we are today, in a military that's been fundamentally corrupted by domestic politics. And what it's done is it's allowed them to cloud their judgment when it comes to basic issues of right and wrong. Just because a president says it's okay, it's not okay. It has to be lawful. And a president can't say kill them all. That's an unlawful order.
Yeah. Scott, shifting the gear to the conflict in Ukraine, we had Steve Witkoff together with Jared Kushner going to Russia, talking with Vladimir Putin, Ushakov, and Kirill Dmitriev. And Lavrov was not there. He went to China, if I'm not mistaken. He was, talking with Chinese, because Rubio, after all, is not part of these sort of talks. Do you think that this time around the meeting was somehow different? Because this time around we see Kushner being part of the team going to Russia. For 5 hours they were talking to each other. what is the position? What are we heading with the new sort of talks between the United States and Russians?
Well, I think first things are clear that Europe's out of the picture. They don't count anymore. They're done. And that means there's no job for Marco Rubio. None. His job was to try and tie all these diplomatic strings together, have continuity of policy, et cetera. That's over. I think there's a recognition that Russia has won this war and that Ukraine is now being told you can do it the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is just to accept that Russia's won and we can get this thing done. Or the hard way is Russia's going to kill you all. Donald Trump has come out and said there won't be Ukraine left if you continue to do this. And that seems to be the position that's been taken. Why? Because the Trump policy, there's a strategic vision of the world that has the United States disentangling itself from, these legacy adventures in Europe, NATO, the NATO adventure. We have to expand NATO, but we need an enemy called Russia. I think that Trump's done with that. The Middle East. He's, whether he's going to succeed or not, he wants to bring an end to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I believe he's sincere in that goal. Whether or not he can actually pull it off, we don't know. But he doesn't want to be caught in, yet another, decade-long war that costs trillions that we don't win. We don't get it over with. He's done. In the Pacific, you see, there's less talk about confronting China over Taiwan and more talk about how we can have normal economic relations with China. Why? Because the United States is focused on falling in on Fortress America, the Western Hemisphere, Monroe Doctrine 2.0. And in order to do that, there's things that we have to do, Venezuela, Honduras, put our thumb on the scale there, and other stupidity of this nature. But in order for us to focus on this, we can't be bogged down in conflicts. And so the Trump administration, I believe, I can't say the Trump administration because there appears to be lots of dissenting voices. But Trump has decided that the way forward is literally he's talking the language that Vladimir Putin was talking in December of 2021, a new European security framework. If you read that 28-point peace plan, get out of the Ukrainian garbage that Keith Kellogg and Marco Rubio had thrown in there, just get into the nuts and bolts. They're talking about, working out with Poland, to calm things down, with the Baltic states, how to de-escalate there, how to create spheres of influence and interest that, don't, result in war, how to get NATO, to calm down, and Russia says, once that happens, we don't have any interest in war. That, and then the potential of major economic engagement with Russia, the best security guarantee that can exist for the United States and Europe when it comes to Russia is meaningful economic engagement with Russia, where there are mutually beneficial outcomes. And I think this is the tack that Donald Trump has taken, which is why you have Steve Witkoff there. His primary counterpoint is Kirill Dmitriev. Kushner's come in, again, more economic minded. You saw how where his mind was in the Middle East. He's there with Ushakov. Lavrov's not there. Rubio's not there because they are not trying to solve this war. The war will solve itself. It is solving itself. As we speak, Ukrainians are being butchered on the battlefield. Total collapse of the Ukrainian military. The collapse that's been predicted. Now, the Russians, are advancing. I think yesterday, in some places, 19 kilometers, unheard of. Total collapse is the Zaporozhye front. If Russia rolls up that front, there's nothing. Now we're talking about Russia can cross the Dnieper and have a straight shot through Mykolaiv into Kherson Mykolaiv and threaten Odessa, which some Putin just said, hey, we're going to do if you keep attacking our ships. It's over for the Ukrainians. They have nothing left. Brigades are the size of a battalion. A battalion's the size of a company. A company's the size of a squad. I mean, instead of having 5,000 men, now they're going to have 250, and that's it. They can't rotate anybody in because everybody's dead. There's nobody left. There's nothing left. And this is the reality. Every day, you're just seeing more and more collapse. There's no good news for the Ukrainians. It's all bad news. Politically, Zelensky's on his last legs. This corruption scandal, and you got to ask yourself who promoted this? Where did it come from? The United States. we know Ukraine is corrupt. I mean, it's amazing how people are saying, oh, this is all good for Ukrainian democracy. See, only a real democracy would expose the corruption. Are you kidding me? Are you high? Ukraine's been corrupt since the very beginning, and we are knee deep into corruption. This was so bad that Congress, Rand Paul, you remember in 2022, saying we need an inspector general. They were giving them all this money. Who's accounting for it? And Congress going, we don't want to know anything, man. Just give it to them. Why? Oh, the kickbacks. Oh, yeah, the kickbacks. Everything, the money, the corruption, the whole thing. Well, we were knee deep in that. We controlled it. We allowed it. We understood that Zelensky only governs because the money we give him, he uses to create constituencies and power structures. The Rada, people only go to the Rada, their parliament, because of the contracts that Zelensky can then give them. If you're on his side, you get a contract. And a contract doesn't mean you actually do anything. A contract means you get money. Hey, you have a contract. Here's some money. No one's going to hold you accountable if you didn't do it. Hey, you got a contract, a $1 billion contract to dig trenches and build fortifications behind the Pokrovsk line. And here's your $1 billion. And now the Russians have broken through and people are going, hey, where's the trenches? And I never got around to building them because I was too busy buying my mistress a diamond necklace and got myself a nice Porsche, and I got a Miami condo. Oh, you wanted me to dig a trench? That didn't happen. This is Ukraine. And now what we're doing is we're bringing them down. We brought down Yermak, who is, if you know anything about how the Ukrainian, politics work, you have the president, and then you have the office of the presidential administration. And most people think that that means that this person works for the president. No, it's totally separate. And it has its own little power structure, and Yermak puts pressure on Zelensky and all this stuff. Well, Yermak got a little too big, a little too cocky. Down, he's out. Zelensky's been waiting. They have Zelensky on audio tape, apparently, divvying up the goods. America has it, and Zelensky knows. He's been told, we got you. We can kill you anytime we want. If we publish this tape, you won't walk out of Bankova alive. They'll kill you. So you got to play ball. And he's a confused little puppy right now. He's going around to Europe talking to Europeans. Nobody cares. In America, that delegation didn't stop in Europe to touch base. Rubio's not going to the NATO summit. Nobody cares. It's finished. The European experiment is done. It's purely an American-driven operation. It's not about getting us ceasefire. What it does, it's about is shaping the conditions for a post-conflict relationship between the United States and Russia. And that's what is happening with Kirill Dmitriev and Steve Witkoff, with Ushakov and Kushner. This is about creating the political environment, that's Kushner and Ushakov, for the economic relationship, Dmitriev and Witkoff. And Trump has bought into this. And I guess Trump has decided that the best way to overcome the political opposition is just to cut them all out. Keith Kellogg's been fired. Trump falls asleep when Rubio talked about Ukraine because it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. In Europe, nobody listens to Europe. Nobody cares. They're not invited to anything. And this is where we're at right now. And it's the best option, to be honest, because the only way this war ends is when Russia decides this war is over. That means Russia has to achieve all of its objectives. And it appears that Trump right now is saying, we're not going to put any meaningful obstacles in the way of you achieving this. What we will do is work with the Ukrainians and the Europeans, to the extent that Europe wants to work, on trying to get them to skip the dying part and go straight to the surrender part. But if they don't want to, you won't recognize the battlefield soon. I mean, we're talking about just major collapses ready to occur. Scott, you've been saying this for some time. Yeah, and I've been damn right, dead on the money. The only thing I haven't been right about is the timing, because I'm not in control of the timing. But military math, which I've been talking about for many years now, is exactly what's happening here. The algorithm of, attrition. And Russia has worn the Ukrainians down to the point now where there is no military capacity to sustain this fight in an organized, cohesive fashion. Russia, meanwhile, builds up reserves, army. The Ukrainians say the Russians just have overwhelming numerical superiority everywhere. and they are unable to put up any meaningful resistance at this point in time. Economically, there is no Ukrainian economy. They're begging Europe to steal $160 billion of Russian frozen assets to keep the Ukrainian economy going. There is no money. Ukrainian economy produces nothing. It can only exist on, it's funny, you got the Rada now talking about passing a budget. A budget for what? It's not, normally when you pass a budget, you say, how much tax income but Ukraine's so corrupt, there is no tax income. It goes in the pockets of people. They need $160 billion for this budget, and it doesn't exist. Belgium's finally gotten smart. Maybe the United States got a hold of them, but and said, we're not letting you do this assets because that'll destroy our $1 trillion venture. Belgium sits at the midst of this consortium of resources, assets belonging to nation states that are used to facilitate trade. And the whole idea is that if nations deposit this money, that it's protected. It's there to facilitate trade. And if suddenly you steal Russia's assets, every nation there now will say, well, you steal Russia, you can steal ours. What happens when you don't like what we're doing? You're going to take our money, and that's the end of it. And for Belgium, that would bring about the collapse of their economy and the European economy and the United States as well. We couldn't recover from this. So politely, Europe's been told to pound sand. It just isn't going to happen. So now the Ukrainian economy is going to collapse, or is collapsed. Their energy, Russia's taken them out. They played a game. They tried to attack Russia's energy infrastructure, and they lost. It's a gamble, and they lost. Russia today, a little bit of belt tightening, but they're okay. Ukraine, not okay. And now it leads to the political collapse, which is being accelerated by this corruption investigation, which apparently is being done at the behest of the United States. We have to be a little careful how we do this because we ain't clean either. But I think what we're looking right now is the organized collapse, and it's very clever. I mean, you have to give Trump and Putin a little bit of credit here, because what's being done is, for instance, none of the existing political structures will survive this war. Even the Rada, the Ukrainian parliament, will be collapsed and restructured in a way that's conducive to Russia's long-term goals and objectives, which are to basically take control of Ukraine politically when this war is done. There will be elections, and Russia's going to win these elections. Zelensky can sit there and have his wet dream fantasies about continuing the war and NATO membership. It doesn't matter. He doesn't matter. He's out. He's a Banderist. He'll be killed or exiled. It's the end of the Banderist faction. They're all going to die. And Russia right now has a whole bunch of people that are waiting in the wings who are going to come in and win the elections. And then, the other thing that came out of the Moscow meeting, interesting concepts, Ukraine, the various issues will be resolved through referendum and voting. Voting is referendum. The Ukrainians may lose Odessa and Mykolaiv through these referendum. Russia will be in control. And this is the reality. Ukraine screwed up. They should have taken Putin's deal made in June. You'd have a sovereign Ukraine then. But Putin put the warning out. If you don't do this, this is the best deal you're going to get, and this is the last time you're going to get it. Well, fool around, find out. And Ukraine right now is finding out the hard lesson. They fooled with the wrong people, and they've lost this war. And it's going to be a decisive Russian victory. And Donald Trump is smart enough to understand that if you want to avoid, a decade-long entanglement that's going to bankrupt everybody and get you nowhere except closer to nuclear war, you have to accept the inevitability of a Russian victory, which he apparently has done. And now he's preparing for a peace that'll position the United States to emerge stronger, both politically and economically.
One of the main objectives of the Russian army and Russian government in Ukraine is demilitarization of Ukraine. How do you see what size of army would Russia accept to agree on in Ukraine?
Russia's already said.
You remember
50 to 60,000. That's it. There won't be any more than that.
The same that it was in Istanbul, in that agreement in Istanbul.
That's it. There will be nothing more. Russia won't accept it. Ukraine had a 260,000 strong military trained by NATO at the beginning of this conflict that was prepared to invade the Donbass and slaughter the Russian speakers of the Donbass. That's 260,000 NATO trained. That army won't be allowed to exist. Now, Ukraine has this fantasy of 600 to 800,000 troops. First of all, they don't have them. But even if they did, Russia won't allow it. To the victor go the spoils. If you want an 800,000-man army, you have to win the war. Ukraine has lost the war. And we're going to see the rapid disintegration of the Ukrainian military very soon. I mean, the desertions are at all-time high. And you're going to see units. Now, because to give you an example of what's happening, there's a town, name begins with an M, I can't pronounce it, Minovgrad or something of that nature. There's two brigades. I think it's the 25th Brigade and the 38th Marine Brigade, two of Ukraine's elite fighting forces. They're surrounded. And they've been, there should be about 10,000 guys, but I just told you they don't have any strength anymore. So each of these brigades is down to about 500 men each. That's 1,000 men total. These are the best troops in Ukraine. And they want to be allowed to break out. They believe if they concentrated their strength, they could break out, and most of these guys could walk home alive. Right now, they're starving. They can only be supplied by drones. The drones either come in with the big Baba Yagi or whatever drones come in and drop supplies, or they come in on unmanned vehicles down. But the Russians have direct line of sight control of lines of communications. They're shooting down the drones, blowing up the unmanned vehicles. So these guys are starving. No wounded are being evacuated. They're left to die in the basement. That's one of the things that came out of Pokrovsk, is the Russians went through the basements, and the basements are just full of dead guys because the Ukrainian army didn't allow the wounded to be evacuated. They didn't have any ability to evacuate them, so they died. And that's what's happening to these wounded. If you get wounded in this fight, you're dead. You're not getting out. The other guys are saying, you got to let us break out. And Zelensky apparently just last night said, no, stay there, fight and die. That's it. If you're going to allow your two best brigades to fight and die, as you see on the battlefield right now, all across the battlefield, there's little mini pockets taking place as the Russians outflank and begin to surround these units. These units aren't, they're looking there saying, government doesn't care about us. What are we fighting for? Why are we dying? And you're seeing the whole army is beginning to lose the will to fight, the will to resist. They no longer believe in the cause. And as that happens, they begin to leave their positions in order to save their lives, or just desert, just leave forever. And this is collapse. This is what's happening right now. The Ukrainian army will cease to exist as a functioning fighting force in the very near future, of any meaningful size. And at the end, what's going to happen is the demilitarization will be as Russia has dictated. Russia will allow a select few, none of your Azov dudes, none of your Kraken dudes, none of these true Banderas believers, but territorial soldiers who weren't corrupted, who didn't get NATO training. I don't think there's going to be any role for anybody with NATO training. 50 to 60,000 people, lightly armed for, securing the border and, basically, limited self-defense. But the idea of Ukraine having a military that can stand toe-to-toe with Russia, nope, ain't going to happen. And there's not going to be Ukrainian military that's going to be the European army. That's what Zelensky wants. 600,000 strong Ukrainian, mercenary force for Europe. Nope, that's not going to happen either. There will be this is demilitarization, and this is what's going to happen.
How do you see the case of corruption? Because after all, I think the corruption would be the key in Ukraine in terms of, and not only corruption, the other point that was mentioned in that 28-point document was the amnesty, given to these war criminals. Don't you think that these two can be used in the aftermath of any settlement in Ukraine in order to remove these ultra-nationalists from power?
Remember, this 28-point plan isn't really a 28-point plan. It's nothing. There's certain points that are indicators on the strategic direction, but the other points are just put in there just to say we covered that base. And I think amnesty is one of those. Again, I think it falls in the line of what happened last June, where Vladimir Putin said we can accept the Istanbul communique updated to represent present reality. Would have been a good deal for Ukraine, but no, they opted out. So now they're going down. To bring about a peace here, there's talk of amnesty. it's sort of a bone, hey, what's my future going to be? Okay, so the war ends. Man, we did some pretty bad stuff where, they're talking about demilitarization, denazification, corruption. The idea is, nope, blanket amnesty. You're all clean. Walk away. That deal is not going to be on the table for long. And when that goes away, the Ukrainians who are corrupt, because remember, the goal of Russia right now is to the political transformation of Ukraine. That means that traditional, power elite structures like the oligarchs and all of the corrupt families, all of the corrupt relationships, they're going to be disintegrated. They're not going to be allowed to stay in place because from that comes the political powers that become the Rada. The Rada is just a tool of corruption. You elect people to a political party, they come in and they divvy up the Ukrainian economy into their pockets. That's what they do. The future of Ukraine cannot be that way. And so Russia will dismantle that, put in their own structures. Whether you want to say those are any less corrupt or whatever, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to be. And I'm not saying that the Russians are incapable of corruption. What I am saying, though, is that whatever exists in the future will be designed to create a political structure that strengthens Russian domination of post-war Ukraine. And in order to do that, you have to disintegrate the current structures. And so, Russia, you can't do that if you give everybody amnesty. So I think, Russia will, and the denazification is another one. People need to understand that horrific crimes have been committed, not by the Russians, but by the Ukrainians, horrific crimes. We don't know the truth of what happened in Kursk. I know a little bit of the truth because I've talked, but, these Ukrainian Nazis went into Kursk in these villages along the border. The young were able to evacuate. The elderly stayed behind, and they were butchered and raped. And I'm not just throwing out words, butchered, literally hacked to death and raped by Ukrainian Nazis. People who wore Nazi helmets, had the SS thing and all that. And the Russians know who these people are. They're not going to be allowed to live. I mean, I'm not condoning war crimes. I'm just telling you right now, they will not be allowed to live. You're not going to see these people captured. And in the post-conflict, they won't be allowed to reside in Ukraine. They will have to seek, safe haven elsewhere. And I think they need to be careful because the part of the normalization of Russia, and I'll get to that in a second, will be Russia will say if you have a war criminal under your jurisdiction, you need to repatriate them to Russia for justice. So I don't think there's going to be too many places where these people can hide. Normalization, a key aspect of all this. People say, well, why isn't Putin going for the kill? I mean, your good friend Gilbert Doctorow, he's a big fan of the decapitation thing. Oh, Gil knows war. No, he doesn't. But that's okay. He stole brandy and whiskey and wine. Good man. But he wants to decapitate Kiev. And why isn't that? It shows Putin's weak. No, it shows Putin's about 400 times smarter than Gilbert Doctorow ever will be. Because at some point in time when this war ends, you can end the war. Let's say, old Gil got a hold of Putin and Putin said, okay, we're going to decapitate. But kill Zelensky. That's going to make Europe really want to do business with you, make the United States want to do business with you, right? And we're going to go into Odessa because, God damn it, we can. We're Russia. We're going to do everything. Odessa, Kharkov, take it all. And Europe's going to go, see, we warned you about the Russians, aggressive. And there may be a peace. Russia can win the war. But then what happens to the sanctions? They won't be lifted. What happens to the recognition of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Lugansk, and Donetsk? They won't be recognized. They'll become little, like the Baltic states were, at the end of World War II, where we had the map of the Soviet Union, but then we said Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia aren't part of the Soviet Union. We don't recognize that. And so the map would show that Crimea and the 4 Novorossiya oblasts aren't part of Russia. And it creates the possibility for forever war, which is, of course, the last thing Vladimir Putin wants. So because Vladimir Putin is 400,000 times smarter than Gilbert Doctorow, he's not going to go with decapitation. What he's going to go for is the kind of peace deal that he's pressuring to get right now, a peace deal that has the West recognize Russia's legal authority over the 4 territories and Crimea. So there won't be messed up maps, and sanctions will be lifted. And Russia will have the ability not only to recover hundreds of billions of dollars of seized assets, but engage in economic activity with the West unencumbered by sanctions that'll bring in trillions of dollars of economic benefit. The genius of Vladimir Putin. This is what people need to see right now, is that Russia's playing the long game. And the long game doesn't involve feel-good moments of raising the flag over Odessa. They're going to get Odessa, but it's going to be done through a referendum. They're not going to physically occupy Odessa because that creates conditions where it becomes difficult for Europe and the United States to accept, Russian sovereignty over these territories. Russia behaves responsibly, behaves within the limits that itself has set. And then as Russia gains political control over Ukraine, if there's a need for referendum, there is. But what happens if Ukraine, instead of being a hostile state that Russia has to strip away territories, Ukraine instead becomes the third sister, part of the Union state, Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. There's a whole element working. Again, the ignorant people of the world, Gilbert Doctorow, they're unaware of this, you see, because to talk about the Union state means that you actually have to go talk to the Union state, and that makes you somehow a tool of Russia to actually speak with people who know what they're doing and are doing real things. You become a tool of Russia when you do this. No, you become somebody empowered with knowledge and information, and you know that there is right now within Russia and Belarus a major effort to bring Ukraine in as the third sister of the Union state. And that's the strategic goal and objective of many people in Russia, I believe, including Vladimir Putin, although I'm loath to speak on his behalf. But it's a politically sensitive issue. But this is the direction that the Russians are going, with a bigger picture about long-term stability to resolve the root causes of the conflict. If you go in and decapitate and all that, all you do is continue the root causes of the conflict. Russia wants that over. And Donald Trump appears to be willing to facilitate this so that it's truly over. When this war ends, it's over, finished, done.